Americans, what do Europeans do that you find really weird? Story 1, what's wrong with being okay with being naked? They're all bits that most adults have seen plenty of times. I'm an American for the record. I just don't see why nudity is such a big deal. Not trying to say anyone is right or wrong, I'm genuinely curious why people are seemingly uncomfortable with nudity. My girlfriend doesn't like being naked but won't tell me why. She just says she doesn't like it, and I'd rather not press the issue and potentially make it worse. Story 2, they view us as uncultured, but are jealous we are richer and more powerful on the world stage. I'm sure we'll feel the same about China if they overtake us. I can already predict the responses: we have free healthcare and better welfare. Sure, it's certainly better to be poor in Europe than America. But America is sink or swim. Sure, I don't get free healthcare from the government, I get free healthcare from my job and a higher salary and lower taxes. Story 3, taking so long to eat and paying for water. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy taking my time for a meal. As a parent, I just don't understand how. I visited France, Italy, and Slovenia last year with my 1-year-old son and 4-year-old daughter. Waiting 15 to 20 minutes for each plate to come out made eating dinner the most stressful part of our trip. Paying for water is just weird to me in general. If it's sparkling water, I get it, but regular flat water? Come on. Story 4, I live in Sweden and I have always eaten dinner at around 4:30 or 5. School and work usually starts around 8 in the morning. You eat lunch around 12 and about 5 you're hungry again. Can't imagine either eating at 8 or 9. Edit, to answer the many questions, let me start by saying I don't speak for Swedes. It's just my household. I live in a small town, school and work is 5 to 10 minutes away. School and work ends at 4 to 4:30. A lot of simple homemade food. Story 5, their attitude towards Americans on the subject of age. Took a riverboat ride down the Rhine River a few years ago. Past an old castle. The tour guide started with when this castle was attacked and torn down for the 5th time in 900 AD. Or the cathedral in Cologne. Well, the church is in continual construction since 1200 AD, because money ran out for 140 years. They scoff at the US only being 200 plus years old like it just doesn't matter. Story 6, not entirely sure why I believe this is only in Netherlands and Belgium the norm. Maybe also Germany. As a Dutchman myself, the first thing I think when I hear mayo is fries. And actually my second thought would be, what else do you use mayo for? I rarely use it for anything else. But I also think there's huge difference between American and Dutch mayo. Because for us it's mainly used for fries, I think they make the mayo also more suited for it. Story 7, I went to Spain recently and it was weird to me how everyone was friendly to someone who didn't speak their native language fluently and was clearly a foreigner. I was just accustomed to the US cultural tradition of treating foreigners like shit. It was so off-putting to have everyone be accommodating and helpful. I wasn't rebuked once for not speaking the language, so odd. Like, how does this society function if they don't ostracize outsiders? Story 8, I work in the defense industry in EU and we pretty much sell our products worldwide. Just saying. Almost every US ship mounts a weapon that comes from my country, lol. Now, from a troops point of view, you also have to remember many countries in EU were literally defeated by the US and had to abide to many agreements like letting US have bases in their soil, or agree to depend on the US Army for many things. Not really a choice there. Story 9, well, I do have a bone to pick with European breakfast. It seems like wherever you go in Europe breakfast is pretty hard to come by. I always dreamed of just going to a European capital and just spending my day sitting at a cafe, sipping on espresso, having my meals and reading a book, and it just never happens. These places never seem to open before 9 a.m. and never seem to serve much of a breakfast menu. Enjoy your toast. Story 10, that we don't have mass public transportation and have to rely on cars for everything, that cashiers at grocery stores have to stand instead of sit, our houses are built of sticks and won't last centuries like theirs. That we get water for free in restaurants, taxes are not included in anything they buy. They're surprised that something marked $10 is really $11 at the register. Tipping. This the one that really gets them. Story 11, the problem is Americans paying taxes, for nothing but to funnel them into a police state and the military industry complex. USA policies are directed by corporations, gun lobby, insurance companies, pharma, and military contractors. It is absolutely wild to see the state of infrastructure, public transport, healthcare, and education in the USA. People would riot and murder politicians if things were like this in the EU. Story 12, I'm from the US, but lived in London for a few years. Listen, Europeans, garbage disposals are great. Also, your combination washer/dryer doesn't dry for shit. Get a dedicated dryer and put it in a room that's not your kitchen. That said, there's also plenty about Europe that I miss now having lived there. Your chocolate kicks are chocolate's ass. And I live not too far from what is arguably the chocolate capital of the US. Story 13, I love nearly everything about the European lifestyle. The things I found weird were also charming. For instance, I was pretty confused by the double parking in Torino, Italy. People would park along sidewalks in double lines. The lack of laundry dryers in most apartments was rough too. My clothes were never the same after one wear. That being said, who cares when everything you see as you walk around is so beautiful? Story 14, leaving babies napping outside, alone, in cold weather. This is specifically aimed at the Scandinavians. I was in Denmark in November and it was a super windy, cold week, ranged from -6 degrees asterisk to -9 degrees Celsius, and this honestly stunned me. I admire that people feel so safe that they can do it. Edit, I know -6C isn't super cold for Scandinavia, but I have low cold tolerance and it was also windy in Copenhagen. Story 15, I'd been to a few different places in Europe and these aren't universal, but weird shit I've experienced in Europe. Not showering daily. No ice in drinks, tiny ass Cokes charging for refills, walking too fast. I'm not going to say walking everywhere and using public transit, because clearly I know it's the better path. But when you come from somewhere that it isn't practical to do it, it feels odd to be somewhere it is. Story 16, in France, you are expected to greet each male coworker with a hello and a handshake every single morning. Women must get a hello and a kiss on each cheek. If you fail to do this to everyone at your office every day, it's considered disrespectful. I thought it was really odd when I lived there, but it did make everyone treat each other with basic kindness. You can't just ignore people like we often do in America. Story 17, butting into each other's business. I am American, got the German police called on me for sitting my car in front of my friend's American friend, girlfriend's German girl, house, in Germany, trying to pick him up while he was in a bad domestic situation with an abusive girlfriend. So I'm the bad guy trying to pull my friend out of a domestic violence situation because my car is causing a nuisance, okay. Story 18, not willing to engage in conversation with foreigners trying to speak their language. I studied German in HS and has decent command of the language, could hold basic conversation, etc. I went on a school trip senior year to Germany and most of the people we spoke to would insist on speaking English with us. Granted, their English was better than our German, but in some cases people were pretty rude about it. Story 19, wet baths. The only place you'll see a wet bath in the United States is in a low-end camper, RV, caravan for Euros? About 50% of the hotels I've stayed in Europe, basically anything that's not a Marriott built in the last 15 years, has had a wet bath. Do Euros have these in their homes? Do they really tolerate everything square inch, cm, of their bathroom surfaces being covered in condensation at all times? Story 20. It heavily depends on where in Europe, but I've found many Europeans I've met to be very closed off / uncomfortable with expressing emotions or desires. Maybe it's just 'cause I grew up in very liberal US cities, but it seems strange to me that people who come from countries that are more progressive when it comes to how they treat others can also simultaneously be very bad at open emotional communication. Story 21. Not sure if it is the same across all of EU, but when I visited the UK, their urinals and men's restrooms don't have a divider between them. The restrooms tend to be smaller there, and that puts the urinals uncomfortably close to each other. I know Europeans complains, rightly so, about the way the toilet dividers in the US are designed, but this is my complaint about the urinals in the UK public restrooms. Story 22. I bartend on Broadway, and 9/10 times, if a European person comes up and wants a beer, they say I want a beer and expect me to just get it for them. They never order by name, and then when I give them choices, Bud, Bud Light, Stella, usually some lager, they always order Bud. Like of those choices, you're ordering a Budweiser? I realize this is a really tame, that's weird thing, but it's weird. Story 23. American beauty standards are not healthy. Not everything should be a beauty competition in my opinion. Body positivity is even in Europe sadly not as widespread. In addition, the more a naked body is the norm, the less you start sexualizing everything. It would even go as far as saying seeing people naked takes the tension out of future interactions. Especially for friendships between opposing genders. Story 24. Get changed in public. I was at the beach in Florida with my parents one year and we heard some French people walk by and my mom told me to watch them because they were going to get naked. Sure enough, a guy draped a tiny ass towel around his ass, then pulled his pants down exposing his dick to everyone, and his wife and kids did the same. Apparently, my parents had seen a few hundred Europeans do this.